Welcome tech enthusiasts, code wizards and digital adventurers. Get ready to embark on a journey to explore the pixelated possibilities of using the Windows terminal to level up your coding skills. Today, we're deep diving headfirst into the sleek, powerful and downright awesome world of the Windows terminal. Buckle up to learn how to unravel many productivity secrets that will allow you to graduate from being a programming Padawan to a full-blown code ninja. So regardless if you're a seasoned developer or just a curious code explorer, I guarantee that you're going to learn something new about the Windows terminal within the next 12 minutes. So fasten your seatbelt, folks, because this is the developer edition of the Windows Terminal Extravaganza, and it's starting now. Right, so I'm going to start this video off by explaining 3 or 4 very simple commands that we'll be able to use to combine later on to create really cool kick-ass scripts. The first operator we're looking at is the chain command, and this is going to allow you to chain different commands together in order to create more complicated scripts. Now this is pretty simple to master. The only thing you need to think about is the context of where you want to run your scripts. So I'm in a classic terminal here, and in order to chain different things together, you can see I'm using the double ampersand here. Now I can also use a single ampersand. Da-da! Now even though these 2 commands look like they're doing the same thing, there is a subtle difference. So let's take this bottom example and split it into what it's doing. So first off, we've basically got 2 commands, one which is going to render the word hello and one which is going to render world. Now when we use the single ampersand, we don't really care if the first command was successful or not. So in this bottom example, we're going to run this and then we're going to run the second part regardless. And this is where the subtle difference with the top command comes in, because when you're writing a script, and if it's really important that the first part of your command runs before the second part, basically use double ampersand. So this is saying that only run echo world when echo hello has been successful. So that was definitely simple enough. However, what happens if I now copy my command and then go over to PowerShell and paste it in? Well, straight away you can see we've got this error. Ampersand character is not allowed. And if I do a double ampersand here, you'll see that I'm going to get another error where the double ampersand is not allowed. This operator is reserved. Now, in order to chain commands within PowerShell, you'll need to use a slightly different syntax. So first off, you can use the semicolon. So it's possible to chain our commands like this. Simple. In PowerShell, we also have the pipe operator, which is this down line here. So I can do CLS, 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 and you can see that we've got no errors. And this, while simple, is something to keep in mind, is that when you're creating your scripts, you need to figure out if you're going to be running them in terminal or if you need to make use of PowerShell. Now this brings us on to our next point. If you start creating more and more complicated commands, you don't want to have to type things over and over again within your terminal window. And this is where aliases come into play. So aliases are probably your best tool within your Windows terminal toolbox to speed up your productivity. And creating an alias is pretty simple. So the first thing to note here is that I've created a folder within my Dropbox, so I can basically use my aliases on any machine I use. Now setting up an alias, as said, very simple. Now you can see here that the name of the alias or the command that you want to use is basically the file name. So you can see here I've got a reset.ps1. And if I go to my terminal, type in reset, you can see that some sort of alias or some sort of command has been run. Now going back to our folder, you'll see that some of my files are batch files, so BAT extension. Some of them are PowerShell files, so PS1. And this is where you need to keep in mind the type of file and type of script that you need to create, and if you need to use the double ampersand operator or maybe the pipe command. So setting up these aliases, super simple, only takes a few seconds. So as mentioned, the name of the file is the command that you'll be using. And again, when we set this up, you'll only need to use the command name, the alias, and you don't need to put in the BAT or the PS1 unless you're using arguments. Now, if I open up this alias, you'll see that on line 1, I've added in the command that I want to trigger. Now, just in terms of this script, it's not doing anything too clever. All I'm doing is writing something to screen. However, another important thing to note is that you can pass arguments into your aliases. And you can do this by using this syntax here. So %1 is going to represent your first argument, %2 is going to represent the second one. %3 is going to represent the third one. Very, very simple. So if we go back to my PowerShell here, if I do alert, because I'm passing in a parameter, I have to put in bat. And then if I pass in a message, there we go. You can see here, alert message. If I pass in another one and another one, you'll see that these are now being passed through the command and they're being rendered on screen. Simple. So having this folder of aliases is great. However, we still have one outstanding issue, and that is, how does your terminal know to load your aliases on startup? So currently you'd have to register each alias each time that you started your terminal, and that sucks. So instead, what we want to do is go to search our system environment variables, so edit the system environment variables. If we click on this, you'll get a little dialog. From here, you can see that we've got this environment variables. Go to your environment variables. Within here, you'll see something called path. If we click on edit path here, you'll see that at the bottom, I've added in my Dropbox computer terminal folder. So you need to make sure that you point your path variable to your folder that contains all your scripts. Otherwise, your aliases won't load. So we're slowly moving towards this place where we can start to create more complicated scripts. Now, one issue with creating more complicated scripts is having to constantly check the terminal. So if you're running a command and it's taking 20 or 30 seconds to run, having to actually just sit and look at the terminal and wait for the command to finish is a bit frustrating. So instead of just staring at your screen like a complete wally, why don't you make use of the beep method? And basically what we can do is chain on a beep at the end of any long running command, so the computer will notify you when your command is finished and you can look at the internet or do whatever instead of just staring at a screen. So going over to the Microsoft documentation, the beep method basically has two overloads. So the first overload here will allow you to define the pitch. So if you want to make something lower or higher, and then the second argument it will take is the duration. So now if I run this command, you'll see we have a very weird tappy noise. And what I suggest you do is play around with this until you get a sound that you can live with. Because let's be honest, beeps aren't the most exciting noises in the world. So let's say 650 by 500. That's probably an acceptable sound. Now again, we are in PowerShell here, and if we copy this console beep method and put it straight here, it's not going to work. Instead, if you want to create a little beep within a normal terminal, you can use this run dll32.exe command x.dll and then message beep stub. Now running this back, I know that you won't be able to hear that beep, but trust me, it's occurring. And then you've got the ability to start chaining on this command onto any other command so you can get a notification when your batch file finishes. So hopefully you feel like you're making some progress, because even though those commands, they're all pretty simple, when you combine them, you can do some really powerful things, which is going to save you a boatload of time. Now we've covered the basics, let's start looking at the scripts that you might want to run. Now, because this video is focusing on .NET and C# in particular, as of .NET 5 onwards, you'll get access to the .NET CLI that you can make use. Now, the good news is that the CLI, as you're probably aware, isn't too complicated to use, and most of the commands are fairly simple. So if we switch back to my alias folder, let's set up a new alias, which is going to make us more productive for building our C# code. So all we need to do is create a new file. Now, the alias I want to use is DNB, so .NET build, and I'm going to create this as a PS1 file, so PowerShell. Now, if I open this with my Notepad++, what I can do in here is paste in .NET build, and then because we're in PowerShell, I'm going to use the semicolon to separate my commands, and then I'm going to put in a beep. So I'm going to be notified after my build finishes. So jumping back to the terminal, if I type in DNB, you'll see now that my build's been triggered, and then after it finishes, I should get a little beep. Boom. Now, if I'm being honest, I'll probably say that I don't typically tend to alias that much with .NET, because the commands are pretty simple. I can do a .NET help, and you get access to most things. Now, one thing I do think is really useful to alias is this command I'm running now. Now, this is actually going to performance test how long it takes for me to run a build. So what it's going to do is clean everything, it's going to do a build, and then it's going to output how long it took to run my build, and then give me a little beep at the end to notify me when the script's finished. Now, again, this script is available from the related tutorial, so you don't need to copy it, but it is definitely worth going over how it works because there's some useful bits here. So in order to measure our performance, we can use the measure command. You can see here we've got our curly braces and we've got a closing one, and in it we're doing a .NET clean. I'm using a pipe. I'm doing the out default, which will render things to the terminal, and then doing a build. Again, we're doing an output default, and then underneath you can see that I'm just doing the beep command. Now my next script is going to help us launch Chrome in debug mode. So I call this script Chrome, and when I open it up, this will be useful for anyone who does a lot of local API development. So running this command is going to launch Chrome without cause, and it means that if I go to my terminal, all I need to do is type in Chrome and I get a dev ready version of a browser that I can start doing my local API development against. So next up, I've got a bunch of scripts which helps me to be a little bit more productive when I do Git stuff. So all of these are prefixed with a G. So I've got gadd.bat, and this is a git add dot. Then I've got a gcommit.bat, and this is a git commit amend. Next, I've got a gpush.bat, and this is doing a force push. Now, for those of you who know how to do Git, you're probably going, shouldn't use force push. Typically, I'll only use this when I'm working on my own machine, on my own projects where nobody else is working on it, and I don't really care because it's just me. Now, if you are doing a force push, sometimes it's likely that you might accidentally push something and maybe lose a change on the server. And this is where the reflog command can be really handy because it's going to allow you to see all of your local commits, and typically you'll be able to get anything that you accidentally overwrite on a force push. Now, because I only need to run this command maybe once a year, I always forget what I need to write. So having an alias of gfuc, you can guess the second letter, which I never forget, is a big time saver. So next up is a gclean.bat. So whenever you need to just clean everything within your project, I can do a git reset --hard semicolon git clean. Then I can do an rm-r dot, and then I'm removing my node modules folder here. However, you might want to remove your bin folder, your object folder, whatever makes sense. Next, I've got a gundo. So I can do a git reset --soft head and then a squirrely line. And this is going to allow me to jump the head of my git commit back one. Next, I've got a glog, so git log --stats. And then finally, I've got a git submodule update --init recursive. And I use this if I'm working on projects that make use of submodules. So that covers the main aliases that I use pretty much on a daily basis. However, for you to be as productive as possible, you'll want to alias the commands that you use most frequently. Now, the next tip is to show you how you can actually search for your most used commands, and that is by doing a Control R. So in my terminal, you can see here that if I do a Control R, I've got this back eye search. So if I say do .NET and then do a Control R again, you can see that I'm toggling through all the different suggestions. And typically when it comes to setting up aliases, the ones that you use in your history are going to be the most useful ones. Now, obviously, being able to search through your own command history is only useful if you use the terminal. Now, if you're new to the terminal and you're still finding this all a bit daunting, then one tip is to use this GitHub repo. So if you go over to file schutz/PowerShell, and remember, linked in the related tutorial below. So this repository is going to give you access to over 500 different PowerShell scripts. So not only is this a good place to find inspiration, if you get stuck writing a command yourself, it's highly likely you're going to find a solution here. Now, we won't have time to go through every single one of these scripts. However, if I scroll through, you can see there's stuff for managing things like audio, your computer. There's things for allowing you to manage folders, how your applications launch, Git related stuff. There's scripts that allow you to convert different file types, say like CSV to text files. There's scripts for you to do different PowerShell tasks like set profile information, run commands, do crypto stuff, list news. Basically, there's going to be something in here for everyone. So I guess to summarize all of this is that if you're not making use of some of the tips that I've covered in this video, then as a .NET developer, you're not being as productive as you could be. And honestly, implementing some of this stuff will take you about 10 minutes. So I really do recommend you invest the time if you haven't already. Now, if you have liked this video and you are interested in learning more about the terminal, then please click subscribe, because I do a video every single Sunday aimed at making you a better developer. Now, as I was going through the video, I did mention that there are other ways of being more productive with PowerShell. And I've recorded a video all about how to install an extension called Oh My Posh. And this is going to supercharge how productive you are on the terminal. It is an epic video. It's linked to on the screen right now. Click on it because it's well worth a watch. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing day. And until next Sunday, happy coding.